O'Sullivan. I wear this every Sunday. I'm actually trying to be in character because we are seeing a movie about Prohibition and the repeal of Prohibition. So, which is exciting. Honestly, this suit has been sitting in my closet for, I'm surprised I can get into this thing, goddammit. Yeah, so it works, and I feel good about that, and I'm glad to be here on this monumental day and weekend, by the way. This is really cool. Really cool. You know, I just wanted to, I got some notes here, because if I forget, I'm old, I'm 52, so sometimes it happens. But I just want to thank Isabel and the entire crew here from the Roxie for inviting me down. I love talking about beer. I talk about beer a lot. I've never talked about beer before a movie, so I'm super excited about that. Like I said, it's just been a monumental week. Decision by the Supreme Court of the United States. I'm sure it's not lost on any of us here right now. So let's just cheers to that right now. Cheers, cheers. Oh. All right. Yes, this is also important too for the Roxie. They just got their beer license. So they're selling $2. Is it $2 for Brew Free or Die, our IPA, out there? So be sure to get some of that. This is, the subject is the history of beer, but I thought it would be important to talk, and I'm going to talk for about an hour and a half, so just get comfortable.
Wait, I need a beer.
I'll join you. No, we're locking the doors, sir. Sit down, please. I thought it'd be important to hear a little bit about the history of craft beer, or beer in general. I mean, we're seeing a movie that has a time in history of where beer was back in Prohibition. So just a real brief history of beer, I thought, and I'd forgotten a lot of this stuff as well. So, and you're all going to be tested on this later, so pay attention. So it's about 10,000 years ago, mankind began to move away from living a life as nomadic hunters and gatherers, and they created kind of an agrarian society. And a lot of historians believe that was kind of the start of beer making in a lot of ways. They settled down, they planted wheat and barley, and these grains were available. Probably the first beer that was ever made was by accident. Actually, I've got a surprise. I'm going to do this throughout tonight, but if you can name me, who can name me the 4 main ingredients in beer? You right there, young lady. Water. Grain. She's doing fine. Hops and yeast. There you go. All right. I got a little something for you here. There'll be more chances. Here you go. Congratulations. So that person that probably put their hand in that water that had grain in it and wild yeast in it and took a sip of it and was like, holy crap, what's going on here? There's ethanol in here. Why am I feeling magical? And so that was probably actually how it started. And then people were like, well, how can we recreate this? So probably the oldest written documentation pertaining to beer making can be tracked back to 6,000 years ago from the civilization of Sumeria. The ancient Babylonians, the descendants of the Sumerian people, were brewing at least 20 different varieties of beer by 2000 BC. Which is kind of funny to think about, 20 different types of beer. I mean, you think they had an IPA, a session IPA, a black IPA, So all citizens were actually entitled to a daily beer ration, calculated by the person's social standing. So maybe if you were higher up, you got the imperial stout. So you flash forward to the Greeks and the Romans all brewed beers. The Catholic Church is where the brewing process was refined, helping support the monastery. And in fact, during the Middle Ages, beer was, some of you know, it was healthier to drink than water. Water wasn't potable back then, and the great thing about beer is it has alcohol in it, so it can help sterile or sanitize water. It also, you boil it, so you kind of, when you're brewing it, so you you take away a lot of the bugs, and he got another beer. That's awesome. And then the pH is a little low, so it's a little acidic. So all those those pathogens that kind of live in beer or in water, excuse me, aren't there. So drink more beer. There you go. Actually, I'll do that right now. That's right. Hops were introduced in the 9th century, so that helped because for a long time the church was using. The church banned herbs and spices because they thought they were aphrodisiacs. So hops were actually added to beer because it mellowed people out. It has a mellowing quality, as you know, along with the alcohol. So around the 1800s, there was a significant advancement in the art of beer brewing, including Louis Pasteur's discovery of yeast's role in the fermentation process. Not a lot of people know that, but Louis, I say it like I know him, he really fostered the research on yeast. But really, what he did is he was pasteurization. I mean, the idea that you could take a fluid and take it to a certain temperature and bring it back down, and then it would be stable and you wouldn't get sick because there's bad stuff in it. And then the dark period. Actually, before I get there, I got another question for you. How do I want to say this? This is an easy one. What was the amendment to the U.S. Constitution that repealed prohibition? You right there in the hat.
21st Amendment.
I'm sorry, sir. Say it again, sir.
21st.
There you go. There you go. You get a prize. There you go.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. Call me Shaun.
Thank you, Shaun.
All right, where are we here?
21st Amendment.
There you go. Keep saying it over and over again.
Oh, they probably all say that, right?
Yeah, so we had a dark period in beer and alcohol in this country. It was the early part of the 1900s with Prohibition, but like I said, the passage of the 21st Amendment turned the tide in production, distribution, and sale of alcohol was legal once again, and that's kind of what this movie is about in a lot of ways. The other thing that kind of sucked about Prohibition was that, there used to be about 45 breweries in the city of San Francisco before Prohibition was enacted in 1920. Actually, here's another question. What was the amendment that enacted Prohibition? You got to raise your hand.
Oh, 18.
You right there, sir.
19.
No, not 19.
18.
18 right here. There you go. Here. There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
That's not going to fit on the airplane.
So after Prohibition, it was like there was a lot of breweries that came back, and the reason they came back was that because they were doing other things. There were breweries that were making malted milk. They were making sodas. So there was one, Falstaff actually. Remember the Falstaff brewery? They were making hams. They had kind of, cured hams and whatnot. And so what happened was you had these big, large breweries like Budweiser and Schlitz and Coors and all that, where they were making this continental lager. So it was this light fizzy stuff that you see out here right now. But it was so you had all these small little breweries that weren't around anymore that weren't making different types of beers. So it became very homogenized in a lot of ways. It really wasn't until 1968 when the modern craft beer movement started, and it actually started right here. Yes, you over there. What was the name of the brewery? I'm sorry? Anchor Brewery. Anchor Brewery, that's right. I'll come. I can't. I'm starting to lose wind here as I keep running back and forth. I'll give it to you. Remind me to give you something. So today, craft beer is for as much as it's growing, is there's only about 4,000 breweries there. There's that's a lot actually. I think about a brewery and a half a day is opening right now. But we only amount to about 11%. Yeah, let's cheer this out. That's good. We only amount to about 11% of overall beer sales in this country. That's imports and and domestics and all that.
It used to be less than one.
It used to be less than 1.
Yeah.
What?
It used to be less than 1%.
It did used to be less than 1%.
We're
Yeah.
changing.
We are. It's getting better. We're small but scrappy. All right. So you guys took notes.
Budweiser sales are down 10% because of craft brewing.
That's right. That's a good point there. Budweiser is down. Craft beer is up. So there we go. All right. That's the history lesson. You'll be tested later on it. So let's talk about the science of beer. I need like a theme song here.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right. So who's a home brewer here? Oh Jesus! Come on. All right. This is going to be really loose. I'm not going to be up here talking like, the large starch chains are broken down by the enzymes and creating smaller sugar chains that yeast can consume. I'm not going to do that. You guys all know that stuff. So I'm going to kind of blow through this a little bit so we can get to the movie, but this is the science of beer. So here we go. Let's see. This is my third PowerPoint presentation I've ever created. So how about a hand for the PowerPoint presentation? There you go. Yeah, there we go. Hey, what's it? Okay. There it is. Stainless steel. In the brewing process, as you all know, being home brewers, I feel like I'm now like, somebody get up here and tell this part. There's, you sit down, I've got my eye on you. There's four. We've already done the four main ingredients, right? So this is our pub in San Francisco. Who's been there, by the way? Has anybody been there? A couple of you. Good. So we've been out there for 15 years, which is remarkable, I think, in a lot of ways. I feel like every 15 of those years, by the way. And then most recently, we actually just opened a new production brewery in San Leandro. Really excited about that. And it's an old Kellogg. It's an old Kellogg's factory. It has a tasting room right now. It's going to eventually have a restaurant and all that stuff when we can afford it. But right now, it's all geared towards production. We're selling a lot of beer, and it's really exciting for just two guys who started a brew pub, and we're a couple of home brewers and back, win. So, urge you to come down. We're open Friday. This is the commercial part. We're open Friday, Saturday, Sunday, from 12 to 9. So, anyway, so let's talk about the science. So, as you know. Grain is the primary ingredient in the base of the beer. We use pale malt as where we're going to extract most of our sugars, and then we use darker malts like crystal malt and black malt and carafa and all this stuff that add the color and the flavor and the malt aroma to the beer. 90% of all the beers have pale malt in it, and that's where we're going to get the conversion to sugars that will produce the alcohol in the end through fermentation. So this is our old Ross Camp. This is like storytelling time. This is our old Ross Camp mill. I actually bought that from Rich Norgrove for a song up at Bear Republic. I think he wishes he still had that in some ways, but he was a good guy. He actually sold me his mill and his old mill and his filter. So. Okay, so at the 21st Amendment, it's kind of a really compact space. It's only about 500 square feet. I really like it because everything is right there. There's great system flow. We have a 10,000 pound pale malt silo on the roof. The grain gets augered into to the mill upstairs that you just saw, and then from there it's cracked open, exposing the endosperm, and goes into the grist case, which is above the mash tun on the left side. This equipment came from Specific Mechanical out of Canada. I was up there visiting, this was a long time ago, and they had these fermenters in their boneyard that a customer had purchased and didn't want, and so I bought them. They were 12-barrel tanks, and built a whole system around it, which is kind of cool. So, thank you. Here's the stainless steel. So when we mash in, this is not my brewery because you can't see it when there's a lid on it, for Christ's sake. So mashing, you guys all grain brewers or extract? Who does an all grain brewing here? Yeah, who's doing extract? Yeah, so I got a funny story. So I started home brewing years ago, and I read Charlie Papazian's book, and I've never admitted this in public, but I was an extract brewer, and There's nothing wrong with it, and I purposely would not read the all grain part. I said, that is just way over I cannot handle that. That's just weird stuff. That's alchemy. I don't know what's going on. This is really unusual. My first brews, I literally would sanitize my stirring spoon for the kettle. Like, isn't that the most ridiculous thing? You brewers know what I'm talking about. You don't have to do that, right? So mashing is where we're actually converting the starches in the grain to sugars, and then we sparge, which is what's happening here. We're rinsing the grain of the sweet wort or the sweet liquor, and we're transferring into the kettle. And the kettle, in our instance here, is a direct fire kettle here on the right side, and we boil for about an hour and a half, and we add hops depending on what the recipe calls for. All right, you're gonna get this. You have to stand up though. Can everybody stand up? Not right now, but I just want to make sure because I don't want to exclude anybody. If you can, I know you can. In a couple more beers, you will not be able to stand up going. What gives beer its bitterness? Stand up. All right, you've already won something though. You in the back there, sir. Hops, very good. Okay, I'll get you something. Okay. Okay. Good. So we boil the wort, and that's where we're adding the hops, and that's we're boiling the wort because we're stopping that enzyme process, and we're sterilizing all that stuff and the wort, and then we're also adding hops, and that's where we're going to essentially pull out the oils and the resins from the hop from the lutein glands, and through isomerization, which is a mechanical and a chemical reaction that occurs in the kettle, and so we're essentially putting those in the liquid. These are hops, as you see on the vine here on the left side, in their natural state. It's an immature flower. It's pulled off before it actually buds or opens up, and then those are how we use it at the pub. We use it in pellets at the pub. It's ease of use. It's also storability. We can store more in a smaller space with huge bales of hops. It's just too much space. That's my hand too, by the way. I'm a hand model. All right. This is San Francisco, so you guys should be able to get this. What other plant is related to the hop that causes psychotropic effects? Did you already win? No. Okay, pot. You were the only one that stood up with your hands waving. That was interesting. Very excited about the pot. Okay, so let's see, let's just back up here a little bit. Okay, so we boil for an hour and a half, and then at that time we kind of spin the wort around. It's all done in the same vessel. Other breweries, like our new brewery, has separate vessels for all these processes. We have 4 vessels, and we do the same thing with 2 vessels. The reason we have 4 at the new brewery is because we can do 6 brews a day. Here I can do 1 brew every 8 hours. So we whirlpool it out here in the kettle and allow all that trub and that protein that might have come over from the wort, from the grain in the mash tun to settle out, and then we run it through a heat exchanger, because the next step is to pitch yeast in the fermenter. Now yeast, and the heat exchanger, by the way, is that, see those red valves right there? That's the heat exchanger. So it's like a radiator on one side, as you know. The wort is 208 degrees, and the other side we cool it down with city water and also using glycol, and we get it down to around 65, 68 degrees. The reason we have to cool it down is because the next step is we're going to add yeast, and right here. And yeast, as you know, is an aerobic organism like you and I, and it produces heat. It also breathes oxygen, and it pisses alcohol and farts CO2. So, and it would die in 208 degree heat. So we have to bring the temperature down. Here's and this isn't my brewery either. This is an open fermenter here on the right side, and this is showing yeast in full kreuzen. That's when it's its most active, and it's if you were able to look inside a fermenter, as some of you probably do with your carboys at home, it's just a tornado of activity in there. Yeah. Next stop is fermentation. So this is when, like I said before, the yeast is consuming the sugar and producing alcohol and CO2. It's much more elegant said that time. So I'm a big proponent of filtering. I don't care if you find it where you're adding an additive to a fermenter and you're allowing it to help settle out yeast. I think yeast is part of the process, and unless it's part of the style, it must come out. Yeast absorbs a lot of alpha acids and other compounds and causes harsh flavors in your finished beer. So this is another brewery. I was busy on the internet. So the brewery on the right, the picture on the right is a diatomaceous earth filter. And that's actually what we have at the pub in San Francisco. It's a process flow. It comes, and once the fermenter has been chilled down to 32 degrees for a few days, we then filter it by running the beer through the filter. Now, diatomaceous earth is it's essentially like a powder. It's the cartilage or the skeletal structure of a single cell diatom, and it creates a kind of convoluted path for beer to run through on its way through the system. So yeast is too big for it to go through, so it gets stuck, and then the beer runs through it. So then you end up with clear beer like you do on the right side, on the left picture, versus cloudy beer on the left side. I think it's really important that you drink bright beer. This is actually a picture of our cold room at the 21st Amendment. These are bright tanks. So when we run the beer into our cold box, we have 6 of them back there. This is where the beer resides. So when the bartender pulls you a beer there from the tap, it runs 145 feet. We use beer pumps to keep the pressure up because these tanks are only about 15 psi. If the pressure was higher to run at that length, the beer would become overcarbonated. Excuse me. And then you end up with that. Yay. Yay. Cheers to beer. Cheers to beer. Cheers to beer. Okay. We got about another hour to go here. All right, let's talk about the movie. Let's talk about this movie. I watched this movie a couple of times, and I did some research on it. So the name of the movie is What No Beer, and it is in 1933, which is like the year after, actually the year Prohibition ended, right? Is that right? Yeah. I should know that. And it is a slapstick comedy starring Buster Keaton and Jimmy Durante, and it was directed by Edward Sedgwick. Yeah, there you go. And these guys were like the hot rock star or film stars of their time, by the way. So both Keaton and Durante were stars on their own. So it was kind of it was odd that MGM had brought them together. Buster Keaton was getting success from his films since the early silent era, and Durante was actually getting a lot of success in radio film. The filming of What No Beer was difficult for Keaton since joining MGM in 1928. Keaton was not accorded, he was used to having like all this freedom. He could go in and go like, I want to do this and I want to do that, and they wouldn't let him do that. So it was kind of a drag for him, and actually this next part kind of makes sense then. So by 1933, this is the sad part, folks, personal problems and a messy divorce were interfering with Keaton's work. He often showed up, which I think this is ironic, drunk or not at all for the filming of What No Beer. So, and actually the other thing is, because you've all heard of Buster Keaton, you've probably seen his silent movies, but there was, and I don't remember what they are right now, but a myth persists that Keaton talkies were critical and popular failures that virtually finished Keaton's career. While it's true that they were later, Keaton efforts were artistically inferior to his best work, many of them were solid moneymakers. So you guys out there saying he didn't know what he was doing, he really did. What No Beer, actually, the other sad part, turned out to be Keaton's last MGM feature and his last starring feature in the United States. Keaton then starred in 26 short subjects and usually played feature roles after 1941. So this movie's about the end of Prohibition. It's the battle between the dry crusade, the prohibitionists, boo, and the wet movement, which is, in looking around the room right now, you guys all look very wet to me. That was the drinkers out there, so. It's also a charming love story. And it's got organized crime in it, and yes, the brewing of beer. So I don't want to give away anything about the movie, but the brewing scenes are very comical, and I think you as brewers in here will be like, wait, they're doing what with what? That doesn't work. So just to suspend your disbelief as you do when you go to the theater. The main scenes with the brewery look great, but what's happening is pure slapstick. Putting yeast into a boiling kettle is not going to help the process. But I think they acknowledge that in the movie. So anyway, I don't want to give any more. So that's all I got to say. Thanks for letting me babble on here for a little while. It's exciting, and enjoy the show.